I still remember the sound my little brother made when he tried to chew rubber for the first time. It was not crying exactly, it sounded worse than that. It sounded like an animal realizing it had been trapped. Dad stood over him with his arms crossed, calmly explaining that modern people had forgotten how to survive naturally, while Noah gagged on tiny black strips cut from an old tire sitting on our kitchen table. The smell of boiled rubber filled the house so heavily that even years later, walking past a mechanic shop can still make me feel sick to my stomach. Most people think starving children look abandoned or dirty. We did not. Dad made sure of that. We wore clean clothes from thrift stores. Mom kept our hair brushed. We smiled in photographs standing beside baskets of weeds and jars of pine needles. From the outside, we looked like some eccentric family obsessed with natural living. Nobody saw what happened after the photos were taken. Nobody saw my sister crying herself to sleep because her stomach hurt so badly she could not stand up straight. Nobody saw me digging through school garbage cans looking for crusts of bread like a stray dog. Dad believed grocery stores were evil. That was the center of his entire worldview. He said corporations poison food to keep people weak and dependent. According to him, nature provided everything humans needed for free if they were smart enough to reclaim ancestral eating habits. The problem was that we did not live deep in the wilderness. We lived in a suburban neighborhood surrounded by sidewalks, chain restaurants, and trimmed lawns. So when Dad talked about surviving off the earth, what he really meant was surviving off weeds, bugs, bark, grass, and eventually things that were not food at all. Every morning started before sunrise. Dad would storm into our bedrooms full of energy while the rest of us could barely move from exhaustion. He would clap loudly and announce that the best foraging happened before the world woke up. Then he would march us outside carrying buckets and gardening gloves while our neighbors still slept inside warm houses smelling like coffee and breakfast. My sister Lily and my brother Noah shuffled behind him half awake, bending down to collect dandelions and clovers from the edges of sidewalks while Dad lectured us about survival instincts. Mom never fought him. That used to confuse me when I was younger. She just moved through the house like someone walking underwater, slow and distant, quietly doing whatever Dad told her to do. She boiled weeds into gray soup. She dried grass in the oven for winter storage. She scraped bugs off frying pans while staring blankly at the wall. Sometimes I caught her looking at grocery store commercials on television with this painful expression in her eyes before quickly changing the channel when Dad entered the room. Thought our life was normal because children believe whatever they grow up with. Dad spoke so confidently that questioning him felt impossible. He always had explanations for everything. If our stomachs cramped after meals, he said our bodies were detoxing. If we felt dizzy, he said our systems were adjusting to pure nutrition. When Noah started losing patches of hair at 11 years old, Dad claimed his body was becoming more efficient and redirecting nutrients toward important functions. Then he doubled Noah's bug intake because he insisted beetles contained superior protein. School became torture almost immediately. Other kids carried sandwiches, fruit snacks, chips, and juice boxes while I unwrapped wet bundles of cooked grass packed inside leaves. I learned very quickly not to eat around other people. The first time a kid saw me biting into roasted crickets, she screamed loud enough that an entire lunch table turned around to stare at me. After that, I hid behind dumpsters during lunch periods, crouching beside brick walls while forcing down whatever Mom had packed that morning. Teachers noticed sometimes, but never in the way I needed them to. They asked careful questions about our unusual diet, and Dad always answered with rehearsed confidence. He talked about holistic nutrition, ancestral health, and rejecting processed foods. Adults loved his vocabulary. He sounded educated and passionate instead of dangerous. Whenever schools called home concerned about our lunches or weight loss, Dad transformed into this calm, reasonable parent, explaining that mainstream society simply misunderstood alternative lifestyles. Things got much worse during winter because there was almost nothing left to forage. Grass died, bugs disappeared, the cold froze the ground to hard for roots. That was when Dad began expanding his definition of edible. First came pine needle tea, which tasted bitter enough to burn my throat. Then came dried grass mixed into hot water until it resembled swamp sludge. After that came leather. Dad sliced pieces from abandoned shoes he found near dumpsters and boiled them for hours until they softened enough to chew. I thought leather was the lowest point. I was wrong. One afternoon, Dad dragged home to old tires he found beside a highway. He looked excited the way normal parents might look carrying birthday presents into the house. He spread newspapers across the kitchen table and explained that rubber came from trees originally, which technically made it plant-based. Then he spent hours cutting the tires into tiny strips with industrial scissors while Mom heated water on the stove. The smell nearly killed me. It filled every room with this burnt chemical stench that stuck to our clothes and hair for days. Dad boiled the rubber pieces until they softened slightly, then spooned them into bowls like pasta. Noah cried openly while chewing. Lily vomited after her second bite. Dad forced her to keep eating anyway because he claimed our bodies needed iron and resilience. I remember staring at those black strips sticking between my teeth and thinking there was no way other families lived like this. By the time I turned 15, I weighed barely 70 pounds. My ribs showed through every shirt I owned. Standing up too quickly made my vision go black around the edges. I constantly felt cold no matter how many blankets I used. Sometimes my heart beat strangely fast for no reason at all, like it was panicking inside my chest. But Dad called it proof our bodies were cleansing themselves from modern toxins. The first real food I tasted after years of starvation came from a trash can behind school. Someone had thrown away half a turkey sandwich still wrapped in plastic. I remember staring at it for almost a full minute before grabbing it with shaking hands. I hid behind the dumpster and took one tiny bite. The bread felt impossibly soft against my tongue. The meat tasted salty and rich and overwhelming. My body reacted so intensely that tears filled my eyes before I even realized I was crying. I ate the entire thing in less than 30 seconds. After that, hunger became an obsession. I memorized lunch schedules so I knew when garbage cans would fill. I learned which students wasted food and which ones cleaned their trays completely. Sometimes I traded homework answers for crackers or fruit cups. Sometimes Lily did the same because she was smarter than almost everyone in her grade. We became experts at hiding food wrappers inside our backpacks and sneaking tiny bites in bathroom stalls between classes. Then Dad found one of the wrappers. I will never forget the look on his face. Not anger at first, betrayal, like we had personally stabbed him. He held the empty granola bar wrapper between two fingers while demanding to know which one of us poisoned the family with corporate garbage. Lily started crying immediately, which made things worse. Dad launched into a screaming lecture about chemicals, addiction, and weakness before announcing that our bodies needed a full cleanse. The cleanse lasted an entire month. Only grass, nothing else. Not dandelions, not roots, not clovers. Just plain grass from our backyard. Dad said cows survived on grass and humans could too if their digestive systems were strong enough. We spent hours outside tearing handfuls from the lawn and chewing until our jaws hurt. Most of it passed through our bodies undigested. My stomach screamed constantly. Lily fainted at school during the second week and had to be carried to the nurse's office. When the school called home concerned, Dad calmly explained that she was experiencing a healing crisis while her body adjusted to superior nutrition. Somehow they accepted the answer. That was around the time something inside me finally cracked. One afternoon I found a dollar bill blowing across a parking lot while walking home from school. I picked it up and stood there staring at it like it was treasure. Then I walked 3 miles to the nearest fast food restaurant and bought a cheeseburger. The smell alone almost made me dizzy. I sat outside on the curb and ate it in 3 desperate bites. My body rejected it instantly. I barely made it behind the building before vomiting everything onto the pavement. My stomach had shrunk so badly that real food overwhelmed it completely. But even kneeling there shaking and sick, I remember thinking it was worth it because for those few seconds I tasted something normal. Dad smelled the grease on me the moment I walked through the door. He dragged me into the backyard while shouting about toxins contaminating my bloodstream. Then he forced me onto my knees beside the garden and ordered me to eat dirt to absorb the poison. I still remember the gritty texture grinding between my teeth while he lectured me about discipline and purity. Mom stood near the porch watching silently with tears running down her face. But she never intervened. That night I made a promise to myself. I would survive long enough to escape this house no matter what it took. A week later Noah collapsed. We were outside foraging near a drainage ditch when his legs suddenly gave out beneath him. He hit the ground hard and could not get back up. His face looked gray. His breathing sounded shallow and strange. Even Dad looked scared for a moment before launching into another rant about detox symptoms. The ambulance came after Noah lost consciousness completely. Dad spent the entire ride to the hospital screaming about pharmaceutical conspiracies and demanding doctors avoid chemicals. But hospitals ask questions when severely malnourished children arrive barely conscious. Child Protective Services got involved within 24 hours. Dad was prepared. That terrified me more than anything else. He had folders, binders, research articles with highlighted sections about natural diets. Carefully staged photographs showing us smiling beside baskets of weeds. Essays he forced us to write describing how healthy and happy we felt living naturally. Even a holistic doctor willing to support his claims despite barely examining us. When the social worker arrived at our house, Dad transformed into the most charming man I had ever seen. He spoke calmly about sustainability and rejecting processed culture. Mom served pine needle tea while nodding supportively beside him. The social worker listened carefully while taking notes, and I watched her skepticism slowly soften beneath Dad's performance. Then she turned toward me. She asked if there was anything I wanted to add. My entire body froze. I could feel Dad staring at me without even looking at him. Every punishment I had ever endured flashed through my mind all at once. The dirt, the screaming, the endless hunger. I knew if I spoke and nobody believed me, life inside that house would become unbearable. So I lied. I told her Dad took good care of us and we ate very healthy food. The words tasted rotten leaving my mouth. Dad relaxed immediately beside me, satisfied. The social worker wrote something down before leaving, and I hated myself for days afterward. That night Dad pulled me aside privately and praised my loyalty during what he called government interference. He squeezed my shoulder hard enough to hurt while warning me that outsiders wanted to poison our minds. After he went to bed, I crept downstairs and stole the social worker's business card from the kitchen counter. I hid it inside the lining of my backpack along with every food wrapper I had secretly saved for months. Somehow those wrappers felt important, like proof that deep down I knew what was happening to us was wrong. At school the next week, my art teacher stopped me in the hallway and asked if I was okay. Not casually either, she waited for a real answer. Something about the concern in her face nearly broke me open right there. Later that day I deliberately sat near the counselor's office during lunch instead of hiding behind the dumpsters. I unwrapped my disgusting bundle of boiled grass while the counselor walked past. Then I forced myself to speak. I told her my family had been cleansing for a very long time. She stopped immediately. Within 24 hours, the school nurse weighed me twice because she thought the scale was malfunctioning. She asked detailed questions about my meals while documenting everything carefully on forms. When I admitted I had stopped getting my period over a year earlier, her expression changed completely. For the first time in my life, adults were starting to see the truth. Dad noticed the shift almost immediately. 2 days later he announced we would begin temporary homeschooling to avoid interference from the public education system. My stomach dropped the second he said it because I understood exactly what he was doing. School was the only place where anyone monitored our condition. Suddenly we were trapped inside the house full-time. Dad watched us constantly after that. Mornings became forced foraging sessions. Afternoons were dedicated to writing essays praising natural nutrition. Evenings involved lectures about corporate brainwashing. The isolation felt suffocating. Lily and I barely spoke because we were both too exhausted and frightened. But something unexpected happened one night. Mom caught me writing secret notes in my bedroom detailing every abusive thing Dad had done. I thought she would tell him immediately. Instead, she quietly pulled a sugar packet from her pocket and placed it in my hand. A real sugar packet from a coffee shop. Her eyes filled with tears before she whispered that she was sorry. It was the first time in my entire life that Mom acknowledged something was wrong. That tiny moment changed everything for me because it proved Dad was not all-powerful. Even Mom was beginning to crack beneath the weight of what he had done to us. A few days later, Lily nearly fainted again while gathering beetles in the backyard. Dad called it another detox symptom and forced extra bugs into her hands for protein. Watching her sway beside the fence while trying not to collapse snapped something inside me permanently. I realized waiting until 18 might kill us first. When we briefly returned to school for evaluation meetings, the nurse documented even more weight loss. She asked directly whether I was being fed at home. I gave careful half answers while terror pounded through my chest, but she already knew enough. The school filed an official report. This time the social worker arrived unannounced. Dad lost control for the first time I had ever seen. He smiled tightly while demanding credentials and complaining about harassment, but rage vibrated beneath every word. After she left, he pulled us permanently from school and tightened every rule in the house. No outside food, no unsupervised conversations, no leaving the property alone. We were prisoners now. That night I sat in the bathroom writing a complete timeline of abuse as fast as my shaking hands could move. Tire rubber, dirt punishment, leather chalk water gross month, Noah collapsing. Every detail, every date I could remember. I hid the pages inside my backpack with the social worker's card. Then Dad made a mistake. He underestimated how desperate starvation makes people. A week later, he sent me and Lily outside alone to collect weeds near the edge of our neighborhood. The second we reached the corner, Lily grabbed my arm so hard it hurt and whispered that she could not do this anymore. She looked skeletal. Her lips were cracked white from dehydration. I realized she was waiting for me to decide whether we lived or died. So we ran. We did not even plan it properly, we just ran. I remember my lungs burning almost immediately because my body was too weak for real exertion. Cars blurred past while Lily stumbled beside me, clutching her stomach. We made it 3 blocks before collapsing onto a curb outside a gas station. The cashier inside took one look at us and called 911. Everything after that felt unreal: ambulances, police officers, hospital lights, questions firing from every direction. This time I told the truth, all of it: the bugs, the rubber, the dirt, the starvation. Lily cried through most of the interview while drinking apple juice so quickly nurses had to slow her down. Doctors later said we were severely malnourished and dangerously underweight. Noah had already been admitted earlier with similar issues, which strengthened the investigation immediately. Dad was arrested within 48 hours. Even then, he never admitted wrongdoing. He ranted about government oppression and nutritional conspiracies while police led him away in handcuffs. Mom finally broke down completely once he was gone. She confessed she had been terrified of him for years but convinced herself he knew better than everyone else. Recovery was not simple. People imagine rescue fixes everything overnight. It does not. Real food hurt at first. Our stomachs had forgotten how to process normal meals. Doctors had to reintroduce nutrition slowly so our bodies would not shut down. I used to hide crackers under my mattress because some terrified part of me still believed food could disappear at any moment. Therapy was even harder. It took years before I stopped feeling guilty every time I bought groceries. Sometimes I still catch myself checking expiration dates on random plants outside without realizing it. Loud lectures about health or detox diets can trigger panic attacks I cannot fully explain to other people. Noah eventually regained his strength. His hair grew back slowly over time. Lily became obsessed with baking because she said the smell of bread made her feel safe. Mom divorced Dad while he fought criminal charges and psychological evaluations from prison. As for me, I still think about that social worker sometimes. The first one, the one I lied to because I was too scared to speak. For years I blamed myself for not telling the truth immediately. But now I understand something important. Abuse trains children to survive first and speak later. The real failure belonged to every adult who saw pieces of what was happening and accepted easy explanations because the truth sounded too unbelievable. Nobody wanted to imagine children surviving on weeds and tire rubber in the middle of suburbia. It sounded insane. But insanity lived inside our house for years while the world politely looked away. I am 27 now. I work in a hospital, ironically enough, helping children recovering from neglect and eating disorders. Sometimes I meet kids with the exact same haunted look I used to see in the mirror. When that happens, I always sit down beside them and wait longer than most adults do, because sometimes survival starts with one person asking if you are okay and actually staying long enough to hear the answer.